Hi, welcome to another episode of Out of the Blue. You'll notice I'm wearing some fancy red lipstick, and that's because today we're talking about a pretty fancy number. See what I did there? Now, e is an irrational number, and it's used a lot in a lot of different math areas, especially in calculus. So today we're just going to be talking about what it is and its main uses. First things first, e is the realest. Now, just because it's a real number doesn't mean it's rational. That means that it can't be represented, like most of the numbers that we use, by any sort of fraction. So like 1 can be represented by 1 over 1, 2 is 2 over 1. E doesn't do that. That means it's a decimal, and not only is that, but none of its decimals are repeating. So it's like 2.71 something, and no matter how far you go out, you'll never find a pattern in the numbers, which means it can't be represented as a fraction, and it's just that much more complex. Besides e being an irrational number, because we could talk about that all day, it is basically a limit. So e is the limit of 1 plus 1 over n to the power of n as n approaches infinity. It's also the limit of the sum of 1 over n factorial. If you don't know what a factorial is, that just means the number times all the numbers before it. So if you have the factorial of 4, it's 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 of 15. It'd be 15 times 14 times 13, and so on until you get to 1. And if you add all of the reciprocals of those up, then you'll get e. That's kind of why it's irrational, because it's a sum of like an infinite amount of fractions, and it's just kind of hard to understand. Besides that, what we use it for in calculus is mostly graphs. So e is kind of the fundamental graph for an exponential function. And an exponential function is just e to the power of x. So as it is graphed, it passes through at 0, because e to the 0 is 1, just like everything to the 0th power is 1. Well, what's special about e is at this point, when it crosses the y-axis, its slope is also 1. So if you took the derivative of e to the x for 0, you would get 1. And that's because the derivative of e to the x is e to the x. It's another cool thing about e. Now, why is this? Because e is e. I'm not actually super sure about how to explain that, because I am barely an undergraduate in math, but there has to be a reason for it, and if you'd like, you can research that for yourself. I personally don't super know well, so I can't tell you, but I do know that it's super important. Also, log base e is a fundamental thing that we use in calculus, because the integral of 1 over x is really hard to do without log base e. Log base e is also called the natural log. You'll see it written as ln. And the integral of 1 over x, if you try to do it using your normal things, you'd get x to the negative 1, which when you add 1 is just x to the 0, which is just 1, but that doesn't make sense because it's got a slope and you don't quite know what to make of that. Well, log base e is what you get when you take the integral of 1. So the integral of 1 over x is ln of x, and that's a really fundamental thing in calculus, and I'm sure you've learned that before, but that's just another reason why e is what it is. Finally, because I can't exactly tell you what e comes from or how we know it's super expanded, a little bit of history about it. Euler could probably tell you why, when you expand it, you cannot get a fraction for it, and that's because Euler totally used e as the basis for all of his logarithms, which is why we have the natural logarithm, which is base e. Now, the first person to use e in calculations was someone by the last name of Napier probably is how you pronounce it. But he didn't know the constant itself. The person who discovered the constant itself was Bernoulli, and that wasn't until like 1690. They didn't use it in any calculations as e until 1690 or 1691, somewhere around there. So it has been around for a long time, but we didn't know a lot of digits for a long time. Every year we're learning more digits of e, just like every year we're learning more digits of pi, and that's all just kind of in search of knowing more about the nature of numbers themselves, because like you can tell, e isn't a number we normally think of. We're not like 1, 2, e, 3. It doesn't happen. And that might be because we're just kind of limited. We don't understand super long, complex numbers, even though in the natural world they're used more than anything else. E is really important and fundamental in a lot of mathematics, and you're going to encounter it no matter what math you do. So just kind of remember to love it. You can't spell love without e, right? That's so lame, I'm sorry. But yeah, just love e, love math, and I'll see you next week. Oh, I almost forgot. Last week I kind of said that e was my favorite irrational number, followed closely by pi, and although pi does follow e, I kind of lied about e being my favorite irrational number. I totally forgot to include phi or phi, and that's totally my favorite irrational number. E is second and pi is third. So I just wanted to clarify that, and if anyone wants me to make a video about phi, then I will do that, but next week is probably going to be about astronomy, so join me then.